When a crazed gunman stalks the Chicago suburbs, he ignites a firestorm of fear.
I want to report a guy with a gun.
He was evil. He was dangerous.
He said, I'm gonna kill this person, I'm gonna kill this person, I'm gonna kill this person.
Who will be the next target?
What could be the driving force behind this madman's rage?
There's got to be something mental there, something that's left untreated, something that snapped.
He was sleeping around. He had multiple girlfriends.
He was consistently thinking that she was cheating on him.
I always go back and think about the terror that she must have felt that night.
He had to take them out before they killed him.
Dude, he just pulled a gun out.
I can get a license plate number off this vehicle?
No, man, all I seen was that gun, so I got the hell out the road.
December 12, 2009, 1:15 a.m. In a townhouse on a quiet street in Chicago's South Side, landlord Charles Thomas is asleep in bed when he's suddenly jolted awake.
He got up and heard another loud bang. Realized at this point that it was a gunshot.
He looked down the steps and he saw somebody scurrying away.
Stephanie!
Concerned for his first-floor tenant, Charles races down the stairs.
Stephanie, are you in there?
What he discovers outside 40-year-old Stephanie Reed's apartment sets off alarm bells.
He noticed that Stephanie's door was broken.
No one answered, so he walked in the door.
Stephanie!
It's in Stephanie's bedroom that Charles makes a heartbreaking discovery.
He found his tenant lying face down on the floor. She was wearing underwear and a gray t-shirt that was soaked in blood.
Charles frantically dials 911.
Chicago Emergency, may I help you?
Hey, I need the police immediately.
What's the problem?
Miss, she's laying face down. Somebody kicked in the front door. Get the police out here, now.
Within minutes, first responders arrive at the scene.
She has been shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest.
Unit 31, send out detectives, forensics.
But as police secure the scene, they have no idea that Stephanie Reed will be just one of several victims to fall prey to a killer this cold Chicago night.
It was a race against time.
Born on August 1st, 1969, Stephanie Reed grew up in a housing project on the south side of Chicago. The eldest of 4 children, Stephanie took her role as big sister seriously.
When Mom was away, she felt in charge. She was no pushover.
That can-do, caring attitude served Stephanie well in high school.
She was pretty good in school. She was into sports.
Stephanie also did pretty well with the boys.
She was popular and all that. She was a real pretty girl.
After graduating in 1987, Stephanie soon got married and had a beautiful baby girl. While the marriage didn't last, Stephanie felt life was complete with her daughter by her side.
Stephanie was raising my niece on her own. They had a good relationship. They would always set aside certain dates and days. We're going to the movies, we're going shopping, we're going to take pictures. And that was their thing.
To provide for her family, Stephanie took a customer service job with a local cable company.
She didn't go to college, she just started working right away. Everybody knew her around the neighborhood because she would always be the one to say, there's certain ways you can get your bill down. And some people would go in just to see her, you know, I can get into this program where you need to be doing this and you don't have to have this.
Slowly but surely, Stephanie climbed the career ladder. But raising her daughter was always her #1 priority.
She was a devoted mother and really supported her daughter in everything that she did. She loved being a mom.
When her daughter entered her teens, Stephanie decided it was time to start dating again. And in 2005, friends introduced her to James J.D. Ameson.
So you were saying you're from the north side?
Sure did.
Oh, awesome. Well, I love Chicago. So they said that you have kids, right?
That's right. What about you?
Well, I have a girl.
Stephanie and JD had an instant connection. When Stephanie gave him her number, things just really took off from there.
Over the next few months, the couple's chemistry seemed to intensify.
What's the holdup?
I'm preparing our snack. Wait. My brother's gonna hear us.
What's up, man? What y'all in here doing?
He was pretty cool. He was really respectful to my mom and, you know, different things of that nature.
It was clear to Stephanie's family that she was extremely happy.
Unfortunately, not long into the relationship, JD lost his job at a local furniture store. But within months, his dream job turned into a nightmare.
He had gotten into a disagreement because of some work that he wasn't paid for, and his boss fired him after the altercation.
He took the firing really hard, so much so that he went into a depression. And anything that Stephanie did or said just couldn't break down the walls he put up.
The easy intimacy the couple shared soon evaporated. And in the fall of 2009, after nearly 4 years together, they decided it was time to separate.
Regardless of the breakup, her family was confident that she would find happiness again.
She was beautiful, inside and out. So if she was single, she wouldn't be for long.
But now, just 2 months later, Chicago police find themselves huddled over Stephanie's lifeless body, wondering how she could have met such a horrible fate.
The crime seems random, but news of a 911 call soon changes everything.
There could be an armed gunman on the loose in Chicago.
A guy pulled out in a black car and pulled out a gun.
After years of being on her own, single mom Stephanie Reed rediscovered love in the arms of James J.D. Amison. And although neither would ever forget their time together, after 4 years, the couple decided it was time to move on.
They grew apart, but Stephanie was really excited to start dating again. She looked forward to what the future might hold.
Then at 1:15 a.m. on December 12, 2009, Stephanie's life came to an end when an unknown intruder entered her Southside home and gunned her down.
He shot her once in the chest and once in the head.
As Chicago police secure the scene, Stephanie's brother Jeff walks over from his mother's house across the street to get answers.
Sir, please stay back.
What? This is my sister's house. What's going on?
I can't answer any questions. I'm sorry, sir.
I knew that they were protecting the crime scene. That was in my head. I was like, oh my God. I said, is she alive or is she dead in there? And I said, I'm not asking you to be official or anything. I just need to know.
Please.
Sir, I'm sorry. She's gone.
That was the worst night of my life. I went across the street to tell my mother about my sister. When I told her, it was like everything just went out of her.
As Stephanie's family tries to cope with the shock of what's happened, investigators inside Stephanie's residence are assessing the crime scene.
So, our gunman enters here, makes his way back to the bedroom, and fires 2 shots at our victim. What you got there?
Looks like a 9mm casing.
The broken doors leading into Stephanie's apartment suggest a possible motive for the crime.
This clearly looks like a home invasion.
It's an active town. We get a lot of crime that comes out there.
Police speculated that whoever did this assumed that no one was home. This is for 2 reasons. 1, it would take a tremendous amount of time to break down 2 doors. And 2, it will make a lot of noise.
Everything most likely went to hell after the robber discovered that Stephanie was home.
So that could explain why there were still valuables in the home, like Stephanie's TV and her computer. He must have fled in a panic.
But with no valuables missing, detectives can't be sure the attack on Stephanie wasn't personal.
Had Stephanie made some enemies that were thirsty for revenge?
Hoping to fill in the blanks, detectives turn to the man who first reported the crime, Stephanie's landlord, Charles Thomas.
Can you tell us anything about what the perp looked like?
All I saw was the back of his head, and he was wearing dark clothes.
Okay. Was Stephanie having any issues with anybody?
Not that I know of.
Was she seeing anyone?
Well, there was this guy named J.D. that would sometimes come around, but I haven't seen him in a while.
Would you happen to know his last name?
I'm sorry, but you can ask the family.
But with Stephanie's grieving family too emotional to interview, detectives begin canvassing the neighborhood for potential eyewitnesses.
I'm gonna give them some time. Let's go talk to the neighbors.
And although no one reports seeing the actual shooting take place, one resident, DeAndre Davis, and his cousin Laverne describe a terrifying encounter that occurred earlier that night.
The witness describes how he called 911 immediately after an incident where he and his cousin had been threatened by a gunman.
Chicago emergency.
My little cousin just, when she came out the house, a guy pulled up on her in a black car, just pulled out a gun and told her to get the fuck in the house.
I can get a license plate number off this vehicle.
No, man, all I seen was that gun, so I got the hell out the way.
The man described how when they were getting ready to leave, a black sedan pulled up right beside them.
The female witness looked in the car to see if it was someone she knew. At that point, the driver leaned out the window and pointed a gun at her head.
Get back!
You can take my purse.
I don't want your purse. Get in the house. Come on, let's go. We ran back inside and called 911.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna die. It happened so fast.
And then nobody showed up and we still saw the car out there.
15 minutes later, DeAndre peeked outside to look for police. But again, he saw the gunman.
They saw the black car parked in front of Stephanie Reed's house.
He called 911 again, but before completing the call, the perp had already sped off. Thinking there was no longer a threat, witnesses called police off.
We don't need no police. He's gone. He's gone.
Thank you. Bye now.
DeAndre and Laverne's statements point to the gunman in the black car as the man who shot Stephanie. But there's one piece of information that puzzles detectives.
This guy turned down money from one of the witnesses, so it didn't seem robbery related. So why point a gun at strangers, not take their money, and then drive down the street to kill Stephanie Reed?
All right, thank you for your time.
But before investigators can answer that question, they receive word that the killer has struck again.
You think you're watching a movie. You can't believe that this is actually your life and it's a reality.
In the aftermath of Stephanie Reed's shocking murder, Chicago police have learned that an armed and dangerous man was seen outside Stephanie's apartment prior to the shooting.
A neighbor and his family member reported being threatened by this person before Stephanie's murder. It was pretty terrifying for them.
It didn't seem like this man was motivated by money. So was Stephanie's murder some kind of random crazed attack, or was he targeting her specifically?
With Stephanie's family finally ready to open up, investigators circle back for answers.
Initially, Stephanie's mom and brother were just too upset to talk to police, but now they've collected themselves, and they were ready to help in any way they could.
I know this is a hard time for you right now, but it's our understanding that Stephanie had recently been seeing a gentleman by the name of JD.
Yeah, that's him. We always called him JD. That was how I was introduced to him.
You wouldn't happen to know what his last name is, would you?
It's Emerson.
The family tells detectives that JD and Stephanie had been together for nearly 4 years, and they had just recently broken up.
When did they break up?
It was sometime in October.
Did you ever notice any problems between them? Anything physical?
Ever.
That's when Stephanie's brother drops a bombshell.
I think she found out he just wasn't being faithful.
That's what was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Now detectives wonder if JD was the shooter after all, and that this was a crime of passion.
Okay, one last question. Do you know if JD drove a black sedan?
No.
Oh, he had a white car.
This just throws the investigators for a loop. Here's a guy who seems like a promising suspect, but he doesn't own a car matching the description of the one seen in the neighborhood that night.
Thank you for your time.
As Chicago investigators put out a bolo for James J.D. Ameson, they soon realize they'll have to step in line. Just 15 miles away, investigators from the Maywood Police Department are looking for the same man for a different shooting.
Detective Randy Brown.
I got a call reference to a man shot. Several officers were on the scene. James Johnson was taken to Loyola Hospital with a gunshot wound to the neck. He immediately went to surgery.
Detective Brown learns that the victim's wife, Elaine, witnessed the shooting and identified the gunman as her stepson, James J.D. Ameson. With no time to lose, Detective Brown races to the hospital to speak to Elaine.
She was very emotionally upset. She was crying. She really loved her husband. James was a decent, kind-hearted man that worked hard for his family.
I know this is a bad time, but I need to ask you a few questions.
I understand.
Can you tell me a little bit about the husband's relationship with the son?
Elaine tells Detective Brown that her husband's relationship with his oldest son, James Jr., aka JD, wasn't always easy.
James was a bus driver with the city of Chicago. He had a grown daughter from his marriage with Elaine, and then he had 2 sons from former girlfriends.
JD lived on the west side of Chicago. My parents lived in the suburbs of Chicago. He would come visit on the weekends.
Though everyone knew James loved his son, he and JD just couldn't see eye to eye on the direction JD should take his life.
He didn't have the best relationship with my dad.
That may be why he used his mother's last name, Amison, instead of his father's last name, which was Johnson.
Elaine explains that after the unexpected passing of JD's mother in 1988, much to his father's chagrin, JD started down a dark path.
So he quit school after 8th grade, was depressed during his adolescent years, and had thoughts of suicide.
My dad really wanted him to come live with us, but he stayed with his grandmother. That's when he started doing the illegal activities.
By 1995, JD had already been arrested for drug possession, carjacking, armed robbery, and even aggravated kidnapping.
During his 20s, James was incarcerated for the better part of the decade for very violent felonies.
After James was released from prison, he decided he wanted to make more positive choices in his life.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, JD. Seems like you're doing well for yourself.
My brother did want to turn his life around. He was trying to rebuild that relationship with my dad, and he started working consistently.
And Elaine credits a 30-year-old single mother named Tashika Smith with giving JD the motivation to stay on the straight and narrow.
They had met not long after he got out of prison.
You could tell she did love my brother, and she was the one for him.
JD and Tashika wed in 2003, and for the next 6 years, everything seemed perfect.
Elaine explains that suddenly in 2009, JD and Tashika separated, and the reason was truly bizarre.
JD thought that his wife was having him followed.
In the wake of these allegations, Elaine explains she was fearful that her stepson had become emotionally unhinged. That's when Elaine recounts the horrific events that unfolded just hours earlier.
JD came to the house. Is everything okay?
I need to talk to Dad. Where is he?
Steve!
Elaine says that as she followed her stepson, he started shouting at his father.
What's going on?
I know what you did with Tashika.
What are you talking about?
He believed that his father was having relationships with his wife.
Boy, that's ridiculous.
I don't believe you, not for a second.
JD, you don't have to do this. Honey, call the police.
What did you do?
Get out of my way.
He said to his stepmother, if anybody move, anybody do anything, I'll shoot you. And then James walked out of the house in a calm manner, like nothing had happened.
It's a terrifying story. But that's when Elaine shares one last piece of information with Detective Brown, a revelation that dramatically ups the stakes of the situation.
And then he said, Tashika is dead.
Thank you for your time. I'll be in touch with you.
Tashika lived in Stager, a suburb of Chicago, which is about 35 miles south of the city.
We contacted the Stager Police Department to do a premise check.
Detective Brown also contacts Chicago PD to join forces in the search for JD Amison. As Maywood and Chicago investigators share information about their prime suspect, the Stager Police Department arrives at Tashika's residence.
My officers went to the apartment, banged on the door several times, nobody answered.
Police!
They were able to make entry into the apartment.
What they find in the living room confirms everyone's worst fears.
Tashika Smith was laying on the couch, covered up by a purple sheet. She was deceased.
We got a body. We got 2 kids sleeping in the back bedroom, too.
During an initial sweep of the apartment, Officers find Tashika's 2 young daughters asleep, unharmed and unaware that their mother has been murdered.
They were both transported to the station while Child Protective Services contacted their next of kin, Tashika's sister.
Soon after, Detective Feynman enters the scene and takes a closer look at the victim.
What do we got?
It was determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation. I observed that she had a small jagged cut along her neck here. There was some blood, but not what you would expect if somebody had cut a jugular vein. It appeared superficial to me.
It's increasingly clear to investigators that J.D. likely murdered Tashika, then shot his father, and is quite possibly responsible for the murder of Stephanie Reed as well.
As police continue searching Tashika's residence, a new wrinkle emerges.
We checked the parking lot for a car, couldn't find it, so we got a bolo out on it.
They realized her Chevy Blazer was missing, and they made the assumption that JD had taken that car.
However, the car spotted outside Stephanie's apartment was a black sedan. So who did that car belong to? And could someone else be in danger?
Clearly, something snapped in this guy's head.
Police realize that JD has been living 2 separate lives, one in Stager with Tashika Smith, and another on Chicago's South Side with Stephanie Reed.
Was it something about this love triangle or the fact that both of these relationships seemed to be unraveling that prompted JD to allegedly go on this killing spree?
With 3 different police departments on the hunt, the search for J.D. Amison intensifies, and soon a new lead will add another twist to this already tangled investigation.
It was almost like an out-of-body experience, just trying to take it in.
In the early morning hours of December 12, 2009, detectives from the Chicago, Maywood, and Stager police departments are doing everything in their power to track down James J.D. Amison.
JD was effectively living 2 separate lives. He had this relationship with his wife Tashika as well as with Stephanie Reed. Now, both women are dead and his dad is in critical condition.
For some unknown reason, James believed that Tashika was sleeping with his father.
He thought that Tashika Smith, his father James Johnson, and his former girlfriend Stephanie Reed had conspired together somehow against him. Well, there was no evidence to support that.
There was a real fear that this guy had snapped and might well strike again. It was crucial that they find him before this happened.
As officers scour the streets of Chicago in search of J.D., detectives continue building their case against their wanted man. Meanwhile, on the west side of town, Detective Feynman with the Stager Police Department questions Tashika Smith's family to obtain more details about her relationship with J.D.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions. Can you tell me about your sister's initial relationship with JD?
According to the family, they've been having problems since JD lost his job in the fall of 2009.
To cope with the monetary stressors in his life, James began smoking marijuana and drinking.
Family members say that JD's downward spiral triggered bizarre delusions about his wife.
He was consistently thinking that she was either controlling him or cheating on him.
He did talk about how he felt paranoid. He felt like Tashika had someone following him. He was angry.
He had a very bad temper, and the police had to be called out for several domestic disturbances before.
It got to the point where Tashika had separated from JD, and now there was talk of divorce.
Tashika's family explains through it all, though, Tashika tried to maintain a civil relationship with JD for the sake of the children, and even let him occasionally borrow her car.
When was the last time she let him borrow the car?
Today? JD borrowed Tashika's Chevy Blazer in the afternoon, so she got a ride home from work from her sister.
He got in about 7, and Tashika invited him in for dinner with the kids.
From there, Tashika's sister informs detectives of a chilling story relayed to them by Tashika's oldest daughter, Jenny. The teenager says that after dinner, on the night of December 11th, she and her sister retired to their rooms to watch TV.
The TV was on loud, but she noted that her mother and James were in the living room of the apartment. They were talking, but she couldn't understand what was being said.
According to Jenny, at some point, she drifted off to sleep.
Her older daughter left her room around 9 to use the bathroom, and she saw her mom lying down on the couch with a blanket over her head, covered from her head to her feet.
She saw James sitting on the couch looking down at her mother. It appeared that her mother was sleeping. The daughter then went and used the bathroom, then went back to bed.
She heard the front door of the apartment open, and then she drifted off to sleep.
The revelation that JD was at his estranged wife's home on the night of her murder only bolsters investigators' case against him. But as Detective Feynman is finishing up with Tashika's family, he gets a phone call from dispatch.
A woman named Terry Williams called police to report that the man that they were looking for had stolen her car.
Got it.
She was concerned that James would come back to kill her.
When Steger police arrive, they find the terrified 31-year-old woman inside her apartment with her 3-year-old son unharmed. A shaken Terry then explains what happened.
Her and James had had an off-and-on relationship.
He had a son with Terry while he was still married to Tashika. James was a serial cheater.
So apparently, JD, who had killed his wife and shot his dad because he believed the two were having an affair, was actually in 2 serious relationships of his own with Terry Williams and the now deceased Stephanie Reed.
Terry says she didn't know JD was married when they met, and the truth only came out after she informed him she was pregnant. But regardless of this unsettling information, Terry decided to continue a relationship with JD because she felt it was best for their child.
It was important for James to be a part of his son's life.
So to Terry, when JD stopped by her apartment at 9:30 on the night of December 11th, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, at least not at first.
You know, he really misses you.
I haven't seen him in a long time. It's good to see him.
Well, I'm not really feeling the best, so I'm just gonna go lay down.
Terry left James in the living room.
Terry says when she woke up a few hours later, JD was gone and her son was asleep in his bed. But then Terry got a phone call that would cast her child's father in an entirely different light.
Hello?
A relative told her that James had shot his father in the neck.
What? She went to the window and noticed that her vehicle was not on the street.
And my car's gone.
Her black sedan was missing, and in its place was Tashika's Chevy Blazer.
At this point, Terry called police.
For investigators, Terry Williams' statement leads them to just one possible conclusion.
He went to her home with the intention of switching vehicles in order to throw the police off.
Do you know anybody by the name of Stephanie Reed?
Oh, yeah. I got a call the other day from an unknown number.
The woman on the other end of the line was Stephanie Reed.
Stephanie told Terry that she and JD had been in a relationship for 4 years, and she had just discovered that Terry had her own relationship with JD.
Terry said as they talked, she told Stephanie that JD was actually married to another woman. To Stephanie, it was like a punch in the gut. She had no idea.
After all that she had done to try and help him over the years, this just felt like a real betrayal.
That was the last straw, Stephanie. He kept calling, trying to come back. She was adamant about, not letting him back this time.
It's at that point, Terry's demeanor shifts to panic.
Oh my God. We need to warn Stephanie about JD. She could be in danger.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you. She was found murdered this evening.
Man.
But as Terry Williams recoils at the thought of Stephanie's murder, investigators can't help but wonder, are they one step closer to this nightmare being over? Or are there more women in JD's life and potentially more victims? In Greater Chicago, it appears James J.D. Ameson has gone on a killing spree that targeted his father, James Sr., his estranged wife, Tashika Smith, and his ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Reed.
My brother felt that everyone was trying to get him. Of course, it wasn't true, so it's like he had concocted this story in his head. No one knows where it come from, why he thought that, and I just feel like it was just something going on in his head throughout the years that we missed.
With J.D. still on the loose, investigators from 3 different police departments fear more murders may loom on the horizon.
Where and who will be the next target?
But before the day breaks, the answer to that question comes from inside a Southside Chicago gentlemen's club.
There was a bouncer out front checking IDs.
You good?
And all of a sudden, there was an African-American man who tried to walk past him into the club without paying.
Where do you think you're going, man?
Wherever I want.
He had brandished a handgun, and the bouncer let him in.
All right, easy, man, easy.
It was JD.
What the bouncer didn't know is what JD had allegedly done that night and just how dangerous he may be.
Once inside the dimly lit club, JD begins terrorizing everyone in his path.
Watch out, bro. Where you going, sucker?
I mean, you tripping, bro.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
You better get back, girl.
At this point, club security descends on JD.
There was an exchange of gunfire.
A security person was able to shoot Mr. Amison in the leg.
Chicago police race to the scene and find JD disarmed and lying in a pool of his own blood on the floor.
James Amison was transported to a nearby hospital in police custody.
As JD is wheeled into surgery, news that this alleged spree killer is finally off the streets comes as a welcome relief.
I was relieved that they arrested him, but at the same time, I'm just still trying to understand what was going on. It's like, for the life of me, I just couldn't wrap my head. Like, till this day, I still can't wrap my head around it.
What propelled JD Amison to embark on such a horrific string of violence?
I don't know if James had snapped or James had multiple relationships himself, that maybe he just lost reality and proceeded to go on this killing streak.
Was it a fear of rejection or paranoia, or maybe both? It's only after JD gets out of surgery on December 13th that this answer starts to come to light.
Once JD is stabilized, detectives from the Chicago, Maywood, and Steger police finally come face to face with their prime suspect.
He was interviewed by detectives on all three cases from the three different towns that they were committed in.
Mr. Amison, we're here to read you your Miranda rights.
He didn't seem to be in no pain at all.
To investigators' surprise, JD immediately waives his Miranda rights.
James was like, I'm gonna tell you what exactly happened. I have no problem with detail.
In JD's mind, none of his targets that night were innocent victims.
They thought I was stupid. I knew what they were doing.
He told them that they could find a bunch of DVDs in the closet of his apartment that proved Tashika and his father were having sex.
Oh yeah, you just check that closet and you'll find what you're looking for. And you know, they all tried to kill me too. I heard them talking just before all this went down.
James had supposedly slipped a tape recorder in Tashika's pocket and overheard Tashika and Stephanie plot to kill him for his life insurance money.
They thought they could get the drop on me, but I ain't stupid. That's when I decided they all had to die.
JD says it began on the evening of December 11th after he and Tashika had dinner together.
JD says that he waited until his children went into their rooms at around 9 p.m. Then he confronted his wife.
What's going on?
I know what you did with my dad. I know about the insurance plot.
What are you talking about? Why are you acting like this?
I'm gonna kill you and I'm gonna get away with it.
He chose to strangle her instead of shooting her. He wanted to prevent the two children sleeping from waking up hearing mommy screaming or hearing a gunshot. He talked about choking her with such force. He thought he broke one of his own ribs.
James thought that she might be playing like she was dead. James went to the kitchen, grabbed a steak knife, and came back to slit Tashika's throat.
He indicated he was trying to put a smile on her by cutting her. Then he covered her body in a blanket.
In a lot of the other interviews that I've done, suspects will go into a little bit of detail about the crime, but not to the extent that James went.
As suspected, JD confirms that he then went to Terry Williams' house, stole Terry's black sedan, and left Tashika's stolen blazer in its place to throw detectives off his trail.
He was very calculated.
JD explains that his next stop was the home of his father, James Sr.
JD's account of how he attacked his father was particularly bone-chilling.
At no time did he express any remorse.
I've gotten emotional more than what he got emotional. That's how sadistic he was.
We told him that his father was still alive.
My father didn't die. He's still alive.
What?
Are you serious?
At that point, he was begging to be released from the hospital just for a few minutes so he could go take care of things, and then he would come turn himself in.
James Amison wanted to go back to finish the job and kill Mr. Johnson.
Ultimately, JD realizes that the police are not going to release him from custody, so he continued with his deranged account of the shootings. And next on the list was Stephanie Reed.
JD thought the strangers who he had held up at gunpoint near Stephanie Reed's house were all working with Stephanie and Tashika to kill him. He thought they were all assassins.
He was compelled by his delusions and his paranoid rage to commit these crimes, and his behavior was irrational.
He was forced to get into Stephanie's apartment.
When he kicked the door in, she was in the bed.
JD, what are you doing here? Look, I thought I told you that you were...
He shot her in the chest.
She begged for mercy, but James shot her in the head and left.
That's a ruthless killer right there. That's a very dangerous man.
As for why he held up the Gentlemen's Club, JD claims he was trying to hunt down his former boss, who fired him back in October. When he didn't find his boss at the club, he simply seized on an opportunity.
We say, well, shoot, there's females there, there's money there, so I'm gonna give me some money.
Investigators hope JD's chilling confession will be enough to put him behind bars for life.
The defendant was charged with the murder of Tashika Smith, the murder of Stephanie Reed, the attempted murder of James Johnson, and the armed robbery of the strip joint.
But even with this mountain of evidence, as the case heads to trial, there's a tangible fear that J.D. Amison will never spend a single day in prison for his crimes.
The defendant is pleading that he was insane.
We all come to the conclusion that he snapped.
James J.D. Amison's violent rampage through Chicago and its suburbs has left the city reeling, and the families of his 3 victims searching for answers.
I would never expect in a million years that my brother would shoot my dad, you know, and also go on a murder spree.
I never saw any violence come from him that could have, you know, like foretold this.
To shoot your father, to kill your wife and your ex-girlfriend, and don't have no second doubts about it, that's cold-blooded.
He had a mental breakdown.
And although JD's father, James Sr., survives, his life is forever changed.
James survived his injuries, but he became a quadriplegic.
My dad was paralyzed from the neck down.
He had no mobility at all. All he could do was move his head.
I end up actually moving back in with my mom to help as much as I can. My dad was a go-getter. My dad loved to go out. He loved to ride the bus and be a people person. That was taken away from him. This is not his life anymore.
Adding insult to injury is the fact that JD's motives for his killing spree appear to be completely unfounded.
There was no relationship between his wife and his father. She was just a daughter-in-law, and that was it.
Police never found any sex tapes, audio recordings, or anything to prove JD's claim that his wife, Tashika, was having an affair with his father. Nor was she plotting with his girlfriend, Stephanie, to kill him.
Apparently, Tashika and Stephanie didn't even know each other. It was all just a paranoid delusion.
Tragically, as the case winds its way through the court system, J.D. Amison's crime spree claims one last life.
Unfortunately, his father, James Johnson, died from his injuries in January of 2011.
It becomes challenging at times. My brother has shot my dad, so now my dad is gone.
So the attempt murder charge on James Johnson was upgraded to first-degree murder.
June 25, 2012, in a Cook County courtroom, the trial of James J.D. Amison for the murders of Tashika Smith, Stephanie Reed, and James Johnson Sr. finally gets underway.
The state's attorney decided that it would be stronger to try all 3 murder cases together.
So we combined the Will County murder of Tashika Smith with the Cook County murders of James Johnson and Stephanie Reed for one trial.
A lot of times in cases where there's multiple jurisdictions, one department seems to overshadow the others and takes over. In this case, everybody came together and worked excellent together.
For J.D. Amison's family, seeing the other victims' loved ones in court only adds to their heartbreak.
Like, here you are, don't know how to approach these people because your family member has caused harm. It's like you want to apologize, you know, it's like you want to give them a hug.
His sister felt apologetic to us every time she saw us, and she would make her way over there and come and sit with us in support of us.
The other families were just so genuine, and they, you know, saw us as who we were, you know, not the family of the murderer, but, you know, just another family grieving as well.
When the district attorney takes the floor, he describes JD as a calculated man on a mission to murder.
The state's theory of the case was that James had an execution plan to kill his wife, his father, his ex-girlfriend, and former boss.
In his mind, these were people that had wronged him. They were out to get him, and he wanted revenge.
He said, I'm gonna kill this person, I'm gonna kill this person, I'm gonna kill this person. James truly believed he had a job to do. James proceeded until he got caught.
The prosecution and defense agree that the evidence against JD is overwhelming.
There was so much physical evidence at the 3 crime scenes. There were so many credible eyewitnesses, none of whom had any interest, bias, or motive to implicate the defendant. You had a detailed statement taken of the defendant from his own hospital bed.
But the defense still has a strategy that could set their client free.
James's attorneys assert their defense of not guilty by reason of insanity.
Under Illinois law, in order for an insanity defense to be established, the defendant had to be so mentally ill that he could not tell the difference between right and wrong at the time of these crimes that he committed that night.
To prove their case, the defense calls a forensic psychologist to the stand to testify.
A mental health expert did indicate that the defendant was suffering from paranoid personality disorder.
People who suffer from paranoid personality disorder have delusions that their family or close friends are out to kill them. They have recurrent suspicions that spouses or lovers are being unfaithful to them.
Given everything that happened that night, defense attorneys had a pretty compelling argument.
However, prosecutors argue that JD's actions the night of the crimes weren't the work of an insane man, but rather a methodical one.
He was evil, he was dangerous, but mad and bad does not equal crazy. He told the detectives in his post-arrest statements that he chose to strangle her first instead of shooting her to prevent the 2 children sleeping from waking up, which clearly he wanted to make sure that nobody would hear what he was doing. And he stole Tashika's car, but then exchanged it at the home of his girlfriend. That flies in the face of a truly insane person. He knew what he was doing was wrong. And as many criminals, he was trying to cover his tracks.
The question now is, which side would jurors believe? On June 28th, they retired to deliberate JD's fate. 4 hours later, they returned with a verdict.
And he was convicted of all 3 first-degree murders and the armed robbery of the strip joint.
On August 29th, 2012, when James Ameson is sentenced, his family is conspicuously absent.
I chose not to go to the sentencing hearing. I just couldn't sit there anymore and look at him because looking at him just really hurt me.
When the judge asks James if he'd like to address the court, he stands to offer an apology.
I thought it was disingenuous. You hear it many, many times from defendants at their sentencing hearings that they're sorry.
What's the purpose of an apology now? You apologizing because you're in a situation now that you don't really want to be in this after the fact.
And his sentence makes clear that the court doesn't buy his apology either.
You got the maximum sentence in this case, a sentence of natural life.
I was happy the family would get justice. Too many times, families go without getting justice. And this was a time that we were actually able to bring a killer to justice.
For the victims' families, the punishment stirs up a mix of emotions.
It didn't feel like a victory at all to me. He killed 3 that night and just changed the lives of so many people.
No longer have a dad, and now I don't have a brother because he's in prison. I've lost both of them. You don't want your family member to go away forever, but what's wrong is wrong. He deserved to do his time.
And while justice has ultimately been served, the curious case of J.D. Ameson serves as a cautionary tale to friends and loved ones of those who may be suffering from mental illness.
We do feel like we missed something.
Look, listen, talk. See what's going on in somebody's life We live in a dangerous world. Anybody could snap at any time. With the excess of guns that's on the street, and the excess of drugs on the street, people can kill at any time.